The house was silent that night, yet their voices carried through the walls like whispers. I was 14, standing in the hallway with a damp papier-mâché mask trembling in my hands, a black cat I'd been making for Halloween. The newspaper strips were still wet beneath my fingers, the flour paste sticking to my skin like a quiet promise. In the dim light from under the living room door, the cat's silver eyes seemed to pity me. I wasn't meant to hear them, but their words drifted through like smoke. "You can take Hunter," my father said, his voice steady and final. "I'll keep Poppy." My mother's tone matched his, firm at first, then softer, cracking with exhaustion. "And Coraline, let the court decide." I stared at the mask's silver eyes, the paste drying between my fingers. The paper strips began to droop, the cat's face sagging into sorrow I hadn't shaped. In that moment, I understood. I didn't belong to either of them anymore. Our small house in Salem had always felt enough. It smelled of sawdust and antiseptic, the mix of my father's woodshop and my mother's long hospital shifts. In the evenings, those scents mingled with dinner, forming a fragrance that once meant home. Dad, Richard James, was a furniture maker when work came. His rough hands were lined with splinters, but he didn't seem to notice. He could turn plain wood into pieces that looked like they had grown that way. People said his hands held magic, though lately they held beer bottles more than tools. Mom, Eliza, was an ER nurse, always weary, her scrubs faintly smelling of bleach and coffee. She moved quickly without seeming rushed, except lately when every motion near my father seemed careful and tense. My brother Hunter, 16, was the family favorite. Football captain, loud laugh, easy charm, forgiven for nearly everything. His room was filled with trophies and mess in equal measure, but his confidence couldn't hold our family together. Poppy, only 9, was soft-spoken kindness. She collected stuffed animals and named each after flowers. Her room was bright, her drawings filled with us smiling under sunny skies, hands held close, always together. And me? I existed in the quiet space between them. The girl with glue on her fingers, cutting and pasting old newspaper into something that resembled life. Papier-mâché was my language when words were too heavy or too light. It made silence easier to bear. I'd mix flour and water, stir until smooth, and feel the paste cling to my hands like fragile hope. Watching paper harden into something strong enough to become a face fascinated me, each mask a temporary identity. That night, when I overheard them dividing their children like property, the face I'd been shaping became as fragile as I felt. I slipped back into my room before their conversation ended, shutting the door so softly it didn't disturb the sound of their negotiations. I set the mask on my desk to dry and noticed a tear had landed on it, leaving a small crater in the damp surface. I didn't fix it. Some damage feels too honest to erase. I left my window open that night, letting the October air sweep in. Salem always felt charged before Halloween, a tension tourists called haunted, but locals knew as seasonal anticipation. I wondered if I'd still be here next year, or if I'd still make masks at all. By morning, the cat mask had dried with that small divot intact, right where its heart would be if cats wore theirs outside. A month later, we stopped pretending we were still a family. I sat in Essex County Juvenile Court, my legs shaking so hard my heels tapped the polished floor. The noise felt too loud in that quiet, formal room. It smelled of paper and burnt coffee. Dad sat on one side, Mom on the other. The space between them said everything. Hunter sat beside Dad, chin high, already playing the part of a grown man. Poppy wasn't there. Too young, they'd said. I guessed Aunt Ashley was watching her. She always smelled of cinnamon gum and studied me like she was trying to decide which parent I resembled. When the social worker read the Department of Children and Families report, every word cut deep. The language was detached, turning us into a list of failures. Neither parent has presented a specific care plan for Coraline James, she said. The judge's voice was steady, procedural. I wondered if she had children, if she knew what being forgotten sounded like. Since both parents have failed to present a plan, she ruled, the court grants temporary custody of the minor, Coraline James, to the Department of Children and Families. I searched the room for someone to meet my eyes. Mom stared at the floor, her white nurse's shoes still against the carpet. Dad checked his phone, waiting for a message more important than me. When the judge asked if I wanted to say anything, the words escaped before I could stop them. I just want to be somewhere someone actually wants me. No one spoke. The silence was its own answer. Miss Rodriguez, the DCF worker, waited with a clipboard and a kind expression that didn't fit the situation. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her eyes, though tired, were gentle. She'd been assigned to my case only days earlier, yet somehow she already felt like the most stable adult in my life. We returned to what was no longer my home so I could pack my things. Mom handed me an old canvas tote bag, its handles worn and frayed. She said nothing as I moved around the room that had been mine for 14 years. Poppy wasn't there. Mom had sent her to Aunt Ashley's, as if my leaving might unsettle her or make her wonder if she was next. I folded a few shirts, jeans, my sketchbook, and my half-finished cat mask. I left behind the books, posters, and everything too heavy for one bag or my heart. I turned to Miss Rodriguez, my voice barely a whisper. "Can I please stay just one more night? Tomorrow's Halloween. I just want to see my sister before I go." She gave me a sympathetic look that said more than her words. "Sweetheart, I know this is hard," she said softly but firmly, "but there are other kids waiting for a place. Come on now." She rested a hand gently on my shoulder. It began to drizzle as I followed her to the car. Salem rain in late October isn't charming like the postcards. It's cold, gray, and harsh. My mask sat inside the canvas bag, the edge of it exposed. By the time we reached the car, the rain had soaked half of it. When we pulled away from the curb, I looked inside and saw the paper collapsing, the silver paint bleeding across its face. Half of it was gone. I pressed what was left against my chest and whispered to myself, "Even the mask couldn't survive this." My first foster home was in Lynn, a small tan house that smelled of bleach and meatloaf. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Neat lawn, flag by the door, a wreath marking the next holiday. Inside, it felt more like a regimented camp than a home. Mr. Carter talked about structure and discipline as if they were commandments. Mrs. Carter smiled too much, her warmth rehearsed. Lights out at 9, no exceptions. No doors closed. Ever. No crying after lights out. It upset the younger ones. There were 3 foster kids, including me, plus the Carters' 2 biological children. Their kids had their own rooms. The rest of us shared. I was paired with Lacey, a 10-year-old who cried into her pillow every night after room checks. She'd been there 7 months and had already mastered quiet tears. I kept my ruined mask and sketchbook in the drawer under my bed. The mask was too damaged to fix, but I couldn't throw it away. At night, when the house finally settled, I'd draw new mask designs, foxes, wolves, calm faces unlike any I saw in real life. I sketched in pencil, traced in pen, and imagined the colors I would add if I had any. On paper, faces could change, identities could shift, and I still had control. One afternoon, the Carters' teenage son, Brett, found my sketchbook while I was in the bathroom. When I returned, he was flipping through the pages, smirking. "What are you, some kind of freak? Gonna wear a new mask every day?" He laughed, holding it just out of reach. I grabbed it back, maybe too sharply. My hand brushed his, and he gave a dramatic yelp of pain, then grinned slyly. By dinner, Mr. Carter had called DCF. The report said I had trouble adjusting and displayed aggressive behavior toward the biological children. When Miss Rodriguez called to tell me she'd be there the next day, her tone suggested she doubted it, but it didn't matter. The decision was made. When she arrived, clipboard in hand, I didn't have much to pack. My sketchbook, a few clothes, the broken mask. 1 month, 2 homes. As I stood in the hallway, Lacey grabbed my hand, her small fingers cold. "Don't go," she whispered. "When people leave, nobody comes back." I knelt beside her, feeling older than 14. "I'll come back," I said quietly. "Maybe not me, but my drawings will. I'll find a way to send them." It wasn't true, but it was something to hold on to. Something that made me feel like I still existed somewhere. Miss Rodriguez waited by the door, pretending not to hear. When I joined her, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes the first placement isn't the right one," she said as we got in the car. "We'll find somewhere better." I didn't answer. Silence felt safer than hope. The second home had 6 beds, all full. It was a large, fading Victorian in Peabody. Peeling paint, drafty windows, echoes of what it once was. The Davenports smiled when the social worker visited, but the smiles never reached their eyes. They took in foster kids for the stipends, not the company. I slept on the top bunk above Trisha, a 16-year-old who'd been in the system since she was 7. On my first night, she explained the rules. Don't leave anything out. Lock your bag at school. You get $30 a month, but if you miss curfew, even by a minute, they'll take half. Don't ask for seconds at dinner. And don't get attached. The Davenports weren't cruel, just efficient. We had clean clothes, regular meals, and a roof over our heads. What we didn't have was warmth, conversation, or any sense that we were more than responsibilities to manage. I kept making masks in secret with whatever materials I could find. Magazine scraps from the recycling bin, cereal boxes, paste made from flour and water borrowed quietly from the kitchen. I couldn't risk making a mess, so I worked late at night, wiping every surface clean, gathering each piece of paper. The masks were smaller and simpler than before, but they were mine, created in the narrow space between duty and sleep. I tried calling Mom once, 3 weeks after I left. It went straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice sounded brighter than I remembered, asking me to leave a message. I didn't. Dad said he'd call after his job finished, but he never did. Only Poppy remembered me. One day, Miss Rodriguez brought a small Halloween card she'd sent through DCF. It was store-bought, with a little black cat drawn in crayon next to the printed greeting. Inside, in her careful third-grade handwriting, it said, "I miss you. Will you be home next Halloween? Love, Poppy." I spent 3 weeks saving part of my allowance to buy a cheap card from CVS. Inside, I drew a silver cat and wrote, "I miss you too. Maybe next Halloween." It was a gentle lie, the kind you tell because the truth would hurt more. I didn't know where I'd be by next Halloween or if I'd ever be home again. November turned into December, then January. Winters in Massachusetts are harsh, but at least the cold matched how I felt, frozen, waiting for something to change. By February, I was in my 3rd school in 4 months. Each time, I carried my schedule on a folded piece of paper, walking halls where everyone else already knew where they belonged. I sat alone at lunch, sketching faces that always seemed to look back at me. In March, the Davenports told Miss Rodriguez they could no longer meet Coraline's needs. I hadn't caused trouble. I barely spoke, but sometimes silence can make people uncomfortable. Or maybe they didn't like that I never gave them a reason to take my allowance away. When Miss Rodriguez arrived, clipboard in hand, her familiar kind eyes met mine. "I'm sorry, Coraline," she said softly. "We're going to try somewhere else." 3 months. 3 homes. I was beginning to understand that some people simply don't stay. After the Davenports filed their report, DCF decided to move me to a youth shelter. Miss Rodriguez tried to reassure me, but I had stopped expecting things to get better. Then, 3 months later, she returned to the shelter, and for the first time, there was something different in her eyes. Hope. "Coraline," she said, sitting beside me on the porch steps, away from the noise inside, "we found a pre-adoptive home for you." She emphasized the words carefully. "They live in Salem. They've been approved and are excited to meet you." Back to Salem, the words stirred something inside me. Not quite hope, but familiarity. "Who are they?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Dr. Miguel Garcia is a pediatrician at North Shore Children's Hospital," she explained. His wife, Lucia, teaches art at Collins Middle School. They have a son, Julian, who's in his 1st year of college. They've been thinking about adoption for a while. An art teacher, the phrase echoed in my mind, unlocking something I thought I'd lost. The next day, Miss Rodriguez drove me to Salem. The trees were just beginning to change, patches of red and gold breaking through the green. Salem in autumn has a quiet kind of magic, even when grief lingers beneath it. The Garcias lived in a blue colonial house on a calm street lined with maple trees. It wasn't big, but it had a wraparound porch with real rocking chairs. Wind chimes hung from the roof, their soft sound moving with the breeze. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and turpentine, an odd combination that somehow worked. The walls were covered with paintings, landscapes, faces, abstract colors, all alive with energy. They had a cat, too, a lazy orange tabby named Mango, who watched me with slow curiosity from his windowsill. Dr. Garcia, please call me Miguel, had kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses and a patient smile. His wife, Lucia, not Mrs. Garcia, had paint-stained fingers and streaks of silver in her dark hair. When they spoke, they looked at me directly. Not past me, not through me, but at me. That first night, Lucia brought me hot chocolate. Not the instant kind, but thick and warm, made with real chocolate and cinnamon. She sat on the edge of the bed they'd prepared, the quilt patterned in soft shades of blue and green. "We're not trying to replace anyone," she said gently. "We just want you to feel safe here. And maybe, if you decide to stay, we could become a family. But there's no rush, Coraline. No pressure." The words were so simple, they almost hurt. After months of being moved from place to place, the idea of having a choice felt impossible to grasp. The next morning, Lucia showed me her art room in the basement. The floor was painted with swirling blue and gold designs. Easels stood in one corner, a pottery wheel in another. Shelves lined the walls, filled with brushes, clay, paper, and jars of paint. She handed me a bowl of paste, flour and water mixed smooth. The scent brought everything back. "Miguel mentioned you make masks," she said. "Is that something you still like doing?" I nodded, surprised he had remembered. Lucia smiled. "Then this space is yours too, whenever you want it." That weekend, I made another cat mask. Papier-mâché again, the first one since that night in the hallway. I built it carefully, layer by layer, smoothing each edge with my fingers, feeling the familiar texture of wet paper harden into shape. This time, I designed it to acknowledge damage instead of disguising it. I recreated the torn mask from memory but chose to coat the broken side with silver paint, not to conceal the rip, but to honor it. A line of fracture made beautiful. Once it dried, I hung it on my new bedroom wall. Looking at it, I realized it was the first thing I'd made in months that felt entirely mine, crafted without fear, from my own space and materials. For the first time, I thought that broken things could still have value. The Garcias never pressured me. They offered structure without control, care without demand. Miguel came home for dinner almost every night, sharing stories about his young patients. Lucia talked about her art and her students, asking about my day but never prying into what I wasn't ready to say. They often included me in video calls with their son Julian, an engineering student at MIT. He showed me his dorm room, his roommate, and asked questions about my drawings and books. He never made me feel like I was replacing anyone. Gradually, I began to open up. I spoke more at dinner, spent hours in Lucia's studio, making not just masks but sculptures and collages. I started doing homework at the kitchen table instead of alone in my room. Miss Rodriguez continued her visits, her clipboard still there, but somehow softer in purpose. Each time, she asked if I was happy. My answer grew more certain each time until 4 months in I told her, yes, I want to stay. The process wasn't simple. There were court dates, forms, evaluations. The same system that had moved me so easily now questioned the only place I wanted to remain. But the Garcias stayed firm. They attended every hearing, filled every form, answered every question. For the first time, someone was willing to fight for me. When I turned 15, a letter came in the mail. My name was written in my mother's familiar, precise handwriting. Miguel handed it to me at breakfast with a neutral expression. "You don't have to read it now, or ever," he said. I took it to my room and sat cross-legged on my bed, the envelope heavy in my hands. Mango jumped up beside me, purring softly. Inside was a single sheet of cream stationery embossed with her name. She'd remarried, a man named David Connors, a hospital manager with a son from a previous marriage. They were living in Marblehead, settling in as a new family. The letter read like a polite update, the kind you'd send to distant relatives. She asked about school, mentioned that Poppy was taking ballet lessons. There was no explanation, no apology, just neatly written lines pretending closeness still existed. At the end, she wrote, "We'd love to hear from you when you're ready." I folded the letter carefully and tucked it under my pillow. That night, I lay awake, feeling its thin weight beneath my head, my only connection to the woman who had once been my whole world. The next morning, I asked Lucia if I could use her floral stationery. I wrote back with a steady hand, telling my mother about the Garcias, my new school, and the masks I was making again. I asked if I could visit for Halloween. 2 weeks later, she replied, "We're still adjusting to our new family dynamic, sweetheart. Maybe next year would be better." A few weeks later, my dad called. His voice was the same, warm, steady. He was getting married to Rebecca Moore, his high school sweetheart. She had twin 11-year-old daughters, and Hunter had just been accepted into college. When I asked if I could visit for Halloween, he paused. I heard him exhale. Rebecca thinks adding another teen might confuse her girls right now, he said. You understand, right, kiddo? I did. They both had new families, and I was just a reminder of an old one that hadn't worked. That night, I cried for the first time since coming to the Garcias. Not the quiet, contained tears I'd learned in foster care, but loud, uncontrollable sobs. Lucia found me curled on my bed, clutching my pillow. She didn't speak, just sat beside me, her hands steady on my back until the tears turned to hiccups. Sometimes, she said softly, the people who should love us most aren't able to. Not because of you, but because of what's broken inside them. She touched my cheek gently. That doesn't make you unlovable, Coraline. It just means they couldn't see how wonderful you are. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not healed, but understood. The emptiness I'd carried wasn't my shape. It was theirs. By 16, I had lived with the Garcias for over a year. The court had extended my placement, with permanent adoption pending one last hearing. I had begun to think of their house as home, my room as mine, and Miguel and Lucia as more than temporary guardians. October in Salem glowed again. Jack-o'-lanterns on porches, cobwebs stretched across bushes, laughter echoing through tourist-filled streets. That Halloween, I dressed as a silver witch, wearing a mask I'd made from papier-mâché and silver leaf, transforming my face into something shimmering and otherworldly. The Garcias hosted a party for neighborhood kids, and I spent the evening painting faces, turning them into tigers, butterflies, and zombies. For the first time, I wasn't pretending to belong. I simply did. Their laughter filled the air like music, their trust evident as they tilted their faces toward my brush, a gift I hadn't known I was missing. Still, I avoided the street corner where my old house stood. I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Some ghosts don't need faces. They live quietly inside you, surfacing in moments of silence. When I got home, tired but content, Miguel and Lucia called me into the living room. They sat together on the couch, hands intertwined, the iPad on the coffee table glowing with Julian's face on a video call. His expression was serious. Miguel cleared his throat, his usually steady tone wavering slightly. Coraline, we wanted to tell you together, if you're willing, he said, glancing at Lucia, who nodded. We'd like to adopt you, officially, to make you part of our family permanently. Julian smiled through the screen. I'd love to have a sister like you, if you want that too. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. No one had ever said they wanted me, not as a duty, but as a choice. I looked at them. Miguel with his kind eyes behind wireframe glasses, Lucia with paint always under her fingernails, and Julian with his effortless warmth. I cried, but this time the tears felt different, cleansing instead of painful. Yes, said my voice steady. I want that too. That Halloween, I became Coraline Garcia. Not legally yet. The paperwork would take months. But in my heart, I had already chosen the family that had chosen me. The adoption process took time, but for once, time felt like it was moving forward. There were meetings, court hearings, endless forms. My birth parents were contacted and signed voluntary surrenders without protest. The court required 6 months of supervision before finalization. When the judge asked if I wanted the adoption, I said yes. My voice didn't shake. My birth parents didn't attend, but Poppy sent a letter, decorated with a small cat sketch. You'll always be the bravest sister I know. Love forever, Poppy. I kept it in my sketchbook beside a photo of my new family. Miguel, Lucia, Julian, and me. Standing outside the courthouse the day the judge approved the pre-adoption order. We were all smiling, but mine was the widest. My face open in a way it hadn't been for years. High school finally felt like somewhere I belonged. I joined the art club, made friends who visited often, and helped Lucia with her after-school art program for younger kids, teaching them to make masks from paper plates and recycled materials. With Lucia's encouragement, I applied to art schools, my portfolio filled with masks, sculptures, and paintings that reflected growth and change. When the acceptance letters arrived from RISD, MassArt, and Parsons, the Garcias celebrated with a dinner and a cake shaped like an artist's palette. I chose MassArt, close enough to come home, but far enough to feel independent. Julian, in his final year at MIT, helped me move into my dorm, carrying boxes and assembling furniture with the easy confidence of a brother who'd never questioned my place in his life. College opened new worlds. I discovered my love for sculpture, clay, metal, wood, beyond mask making. My professors challenged me to expand my ideas, to see art as a dialogue rather than just expression. Still, masks remained my core, my signature. I experimented with leather, fabric, wire mesh, and found materials, each piece balancing concealment and revelation. In my junior year, a professor submitted my masks to a student exhibition in Boston's South End. 3 were accepted, a series I called Transformations, each representing a stage of becoming. At the opening, the Garcias came, dressed up, proud smiles lighting their faces. They stood beside me as visitors examined my work and asked about my inspiration and process. "Your daughter has extraordinary talent," someone told Lucia. She smiled, squeezing my hand. "Yes," she said. "She does. Your daughter." The words settled over me like a quiet truth. Boston smells different from Salem. Sharper, faster, like rain on concrete and freshly brewed coffee. At 25, I run a small studio in Jamaica Plain, between a bakery and a thrift shop. The space isn't big, but sunlight streams through the east-facing windows, turning even my cluttered work tables into something beautiful. The sign above the door reads, "Paper Souls, Masks and Art by Coraline Garcia." I create commission pieces, masks for theater, installations for offices, but every Saturday, I teach kids art classes. We use recycled paper and flour paste, just like I did at 14. Their laughter fills the room as they create faces that amuse or frighten, each one uniquely theirs. Some talk about their families with joy, others stay quiet, working alone. Those are the ones I guide most gently, offering help without insistence. Together, we make faces not to hide behind, but to explore who we are or might become. Every year, I send Poppy a new mask, each one different. One gilded in gold leaf, one painted in twilight blue, another woven from copper that catches the light like fire. Each is a promise that we're still connected, still sisters, despite the distance and our different last names. She's in college now, studying psychology at UMass Amherst. We meet for coffee when she's home on breaks. Our conversation's easier each time. The past no longer something we avoid, but something we've both grown from. She tells me about our mother, who divorced David Connors after 3 years, and about our father, who seems content with Rebecca and her daughters. She talks about Hunter, now working in finance in New York, married and expecting a child. I listen closely, asking questions, genuinely curious about these people who share my blood, even if not my daily life. At times, I notice a flicker of longing in Poppy's eyes, as if she wonders what life might have been like if our family had stayed together, if I had never left. But I don't share that feeling. What broke apart gave me what I needed, even if it hurt to get there. This October, a package arrived from Poppy. She's 20 now, grown, yet her laughter still carries the echo of the little sister I once tucked in at night. Inside was a note asking me to open the box on Halloween night, so I waited. That evening, the Garcias came over for dinner. Lucia brought empanadas made from her grandmother's recipe. Miguel carved a pumpkin that looked remarkably like our cat, Mango. Julian, home from California where he works as an engineer, brought wine and stories about his latest project. We ate, laughed, and retold the old story of the night I spilled paste on their carpet while trying to make a papier-mâché phoenix that was far beyond my skill level. What was once embarrassing now felt like part of our family's history. After they left, promising to return for brunch on Sunday, I opened Poppy's package. Inside was a silver papier-mâché cat mask, its edges uneven, the paint a bit thick, but beautiful in its sincerity. There was a card beneath it. This year, I made my own silver cat mask. I was thinking of you. I hung it on my studio wall beside the one I made at 16, the one that had once been broken and later covered in silver paint, made honest through its repair. Standing before them, one made by me and one made for me, I whispered softly, "You're always here with me." I believed it completely. Sometimes customers ask about the name of my studio, Paper Souls. I tell them paper is fragile on its own, but when layered carefully with the right adhesive, it becomes stronger than anyone expects. People are the same way, I explain. Layer by layer, we rebuild ourselves until we can withstand what life throws at us. When my students peel their dried masks from the molds, the room fills with laughter and surprise, a chorus of discovery as they realize they've created something sturdy from fragile materials. It's a sound I once thought I'd lost. A reminder that joy often grows from transformation. Every Halloween, the Garcias visit my studio and we hang our new masks side by side. Mine, silver and steady from years of practice. Lucia's, vibrant and confident like her art. Miguel's, precise and detailed, reflecting his steady hands. Julian's, ingenious, often with moving parts that catch the light. And now Poppy's, uncertain but sincere, joining the family wall. Sometimes I wonder what my birth parents would think if they saw this gallery of faces, a family built by choice, not by birth. I doubt they'd understand. Some people never learn to see the beauty that grows from the cracks. I've learned that family isn't about who you start with. It's about who stays to help you rebuild when you fall apart. It's about those who see your flaws and don't turn away, but help you shape them into something truer and more whole. When I turned 30, I received an invitation to Hunter's daughter's first birthday. My niece. The idea felt both strange and wonderful. I sent a small mask made of soft felt and ribbon, a silver cat, of course. The tradition continues. I didn't attend the party. Some distances aren't closed by a single gesture, but I included my phone number with the gift, an opening, if not yet a door. Hunter called a week later. His voice was deeper, but still carried the same steady tone I remembered. Coraline, he said. She loves it. It's hanging above her crib. We spoke for almost an hour, awkward at first, then easier. He asked about my art and studio. I asked about his daughter, his wife, his life in New York. Neither of us mentioned our parents. Some silences are mutual understandings, not omissions. Before we hung up, he said quietly, I should have done more back then. I replied, we all should have. But we're doing something now. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a beginning. A new layer added to an old form. At 14, standing in that hallway with a damp papier-mâché mask in my hands, I couldn't have imagined the life I have now. I couldn't have known that being left behind would lead me to being chosen, that the break would create space for strength to grow. No one has the right to decide your worth because they walked away. Love isn't defined by blood. It's built by those who stay, who see your cracks, and still choose to hold you. If you were me, would you have forgiven them? Would you have gone back or stayed with the ones who stayed for you? For me, the answer is clear. I'm Coraline Garcia. And this is the mask I repaired. Not the one that fell apart in the rain years ago, but the one I wear every day. The identity I built from the fragments that survived, layer by layer, tier by tier, choice by choice. It isn't perfect, but it's strong, it's beautiful, and it's mine. Each night, as I close my studio and switch off the lights that illuminate dozens of masks, mine and my students', I think of that 14-year-old girl standing in the hallway with her broken creation. I wish I could tell her that the breaking wasn't the end. It was the start of something new. A story about how we must sometimes lose the masks others made for us before we can craft the ones that truly fit. And as I walk home through autumn streets scented with rain and leaves, I carry this truth with me. No wound is too deep for art to reach, no fracture too wide for love to mend, and no mask so broken that it can't become something stronger and more beautiful than before. That is the inheritance I've claimed. That is the legacy I'll pass on. That is the mask I repaired.